Hello, hi, how are you? And welcome to another podcast by George. Well, what do you say today? Let's take a walk. Let's take a hike. Let's go to Dead Man's Curve. That's right, there's a little place that I frequent once in a while, kind of out in the sticks here. And to get there, you got to walk down a country lane between a couple of cornfields. I mean, you got to walk through the corn. And if you live in Iowa, you realize that pretty much if you're going to go anywhere, you're going to spend some time in and around a cornfield, so that's all right. It's a beautiful morning this morning. It's about, 20, 25 degrees. And, it's a time to reflect, reminisce, contemplate, get a little philosophical on your ass, I guess you could say. And when I walk along at times like this, I tend to think about my buddy Joe. And you've heard me mention him on the podcast before, and I thought I'd tell you a little story here while we're walking along to kind of pass the time about Joe. You know, we're going to go down to Dead Man's Curve, and the reason it's called that is because this lane that you're looking at used to be an unimproved county road, a gravel road, not a rock road. Actually used to have gravel on it, and it was closed, and it's now just an easement through a farm field. But anyway, it goes to this river and takes a hard left up ahead. And the reason it does that is because there's a bend in the river. And that river is a river that our friend Joe has spent some time on in his lifetime. As a matter of fact, if you ever get a chance, have his brothers share with you the video of Joe on this river. And it's a great example of the kind of guy that he was, because Joe knew how to pass time. If he was walking along with us right now, he'd be telling a story or singing a song that he was making up as he walked along. And it would be funny. I mean, that's the kind of guy that he was. And the thing about that video, he's in a canoe with his brothers on this river. And Joe was a thespian wannabe. He was an actor wannabe. And I don't know if you've ever read the book Centennial, or maybe seen the miniseries based on the novel by James Michener, but Joe had. It's a great book. And there's a French trapper in that book named Pasquinel. And Pasquinel spent his life on the rivers of the Great West, the western part of the United States, when it was first opening up, when white man first, trod the western part of the United States. And the rivers were the interstates. I mean, that's how he got, Pasquinel got his furs back to the trading post in St. Louis. So a lot of the book was devoted to that. Well, anyway, Joe would decide that he was Pasquinel, and he would remember some quotes from the book and tell the story of Pasquinel as he was canoeing down this river. It's a pretty cute little video. I mean, I would recommend viewing that if you ever have an opportunity or an interest. Contact me and I'll hook you up, because it's well worth it. But Joe was a great guy, one of a kind. He wasn't politically correct. He wasn't socially correct. He wasn't any kind of correct. The dude just lived life to the fullest and did what he wanted to do and said what he wanted to say. And I have a little story about that I'll share with you here as we walk along. I told this story at his funeral. And a lot of you know about Joe's tragic death. His beautiful wife, Lisa, the light of his life, passed away with ALS. You've heard me mention that on an earlier podcast, almost 10 years ago probably. And a year later, Joe was killed in a motorcycle accident. And that's why I don't like motorcycles. And but anyway, I told this story at his funeral, and it's a great story, and it bears repeating, and I wanted to get it into a podcast. Joe and I, when we were younger, and I was still doing the drinking thing, we were down in Hot Springs, Arkansas, visiting my dad on a fishing trip. And we went to this convenience store, And down there, convenience stores are combination bait shops mostly, and that's what this was. And it was full of, I don't know, maybe it's not fair to call them rednecks, but I don't know. I don't mind being called a redneck. It was full of rednecks. And we went in there and got our cases of beer, and we're standing in line to check out with a bunch of other guys. And at the back of the line's a woman she's got some kids that are screaming, acting up, carrying on like kids will do. And Joe just kind of grabbed her by the arm and those kids and moved them right up to the front of the line to make it easier for her. And I'll never forget standing behind Joe, and I thought, boy, I wish I'd have done something like that. I mean, that was kind of guy Joe was. I mean, that was chivalrous, that was nice, that was considerate and caring, empathetic, if you want to call it that. But I'm looking at the guy working the counter, the cash register, and this guy is livid. I mean, he is really angry. Now, this is about 30 years ago, and we're in Arkansas. That's the deep south. And it took me a little while to sort it out because I'm a northern boy. I'm not from the south. But the reason this guy was mad as hell was because that woman with those kids was black. Yeah. And didn't like the fact that Joe moved her ahead of not only us, but those other guys in line. And I'll tell you, it's a good thing he didn't say anything to our friend Joe, because like I said, he wasn't politically correct, socially correct. He wasn't Southern correct, cracker correct. I mean, he wouldn't take anything from anybody, sometimes to his own detriment, but it would have been on if anybody would have said anything to him. But that's the kind of guy my buddy Joe was, and love him dearly to this day. Well, okay, look ahead here. See that arrow? See that sign? That's Dead Man's Curve. See the guardrail? That's the curve. Yeah, a lot of songs about Dead Man's Curve. But I tell people I walk down here and I come down, and the other side of the guardrail there is the river, and my friends, all my dead friends. You get to be my age, you got a lot of them. And Joe's right at the top of the list. They're all down here at Dead Man's Curve. They're always waiting for you. You come down here and watch the river and sit for a while, and they'll come back to you. These stories will come back to you. And I heard one time that the Native Americans used to say that you don't really die, you always live on in somebody's memory. All right, I'm going to step over this guardrail and set up a tripod, and we'll take a look at the river at Dead Man's Curve. Stand by. So how's that? And that river just keeps on a-flowing at Dead Man's Curve. The water's a little green. It could be that, all the algae and particulates, the things that live in the river, haven't been killed off by the freezes yet, and we've had several. You can see a little dusting of snow. There was a little skim of ice on yesterday, but it appears like a lot of that has melted off. How many people remember Sunday morning on CBS with Charles Kuralt? Remember the nature scenes at the end of the broadcast? Well, that's what we've got here today. And we're just watching the river flow. Now, if you sit here long enough and you're quiet enough, you can see quite a bit of wildlife. And of course, I'm not quiet today because I'm doing the podcast, so we're probably not going to see very many varmints, but I've seen river otters here. I've seen, of course, a lot of ducks and geese. Saw an eagle on this river, flew right over my head and screeched at me. That was pretty cool. Deer. There's a lot of things you can see if you just sit quietly, which ain't my style and doesn't fit a podcast very well, but let's sit quietly here and just meditate, ruminate, vegetate. It's all good. So that's the morning light that we're seeing now. Not early morning, but it's still morning. And it's about 25 degrees maybe. It's cold down here, but that doesn't bother me. You just dress for it. Freezes the mud. People that know me know that I've been down here a lot colder than this. All right, so before we leave, just so that you don't think I'm nuts, I wanted to show you this campfire that I talk about, where the friends at Dead Man's Curve all get together, and you can see the campfire there, the flames and the guys sitting around. Late at night, they sing songs. They're all drinking beer. That's the Dead Man's Curve campfire. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little bit of silliness and a walk in the fields. It's just another podcast by George.